good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of the Defiant Optimist series, IX's webinar series that brings together some of the boldest and most innovative leaders who are making finance work for the 99%. My name is Sarah Tam from IX's Growth and Innovation team, and I'll be your MC for today. Our episode today is very interesting and brings together many leaders in the space and innovative thinkers. And we're actually going to Latin America and the Caribbean and diving deeper into understanding the sustainable development landscape, as well as the region's plan for building COVID relief, resilience, and recovery. We're joined by a fantastic lineup of speakers from IIX, our partners at Market Access, and of course, our featured guest, Mr. Mauricio Claver-Carone, the president of the Inter-American Development Bank, who all together bring in different perspectives for today's discussion. We do have a full program ahead of us, so before we jump in, let me first share a few words on the tech side. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time on Blue Jeans, just so you know, you will be kept on mute throughout the webinar, but we do invite you to share your reactions as you listen in on the chat box. Feel free also to ask any questions during the episode as well by clicking on the Q&A icon on the right side of your screen there. Don't forget to upvote for your favorite questions as well by pressing the like button, and we'll be sure to get to the ones with the most liked towards the end of the session. Of course, if you run into any tech issues, my colleagues Gemma and Jambi, who you may have been already in contact with, they are both ready and on standby, so please do reach out if you have any issues on your side. That's all from me for now, so I will pass it off to Professor Shahnaz to kick things off and introduce some of our speakers today. So, Professor Shahnaz, over to you.
Thank you, Sarah, and good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to all of you. We are reaching out to you from Singapore, and we also have colleagues in Mexico, and then, of course, we have our guest speaker in DC. So this is a wonderful global webinar that we're pulling together. So hello everyone, and welcome to another session of the Defiant Optimist, where we discuss how to make finance and business work for the 99%. As always, let me begin by introducing this series to those who are joining us for the first time. Defiant Optimist is an online series at the IIX Institute, which is an arm of IIX, where we feature exemplary leaders in sustainable business and finance. There is more than a conversation than just with two people. It's a chance to dive deep into the stories of these people who have the power to impact financial markets and make them work for the 99%. And most importantly, it is a chance for you to find your own path in the movement we're creating together. Now, this week, we're going to be talking about a very exciting space for IIX, Latin America and the Caribbean, where we are setting our sights next to cultivate the impact investing ecosystem. This region has been fraught with economic, social, and environmental turmoil, which only exacerbated over the past year, as frankly is true for many places around the globe. But it also shows great opportunity for growth and creation of innovation and inclusive financial systems. And of course, with all our work and keeping with the theme of our partnership and market access, this episode will have a special focus on women who are the solution builders to economic, social, and environmental crises. We always say that women are the backbone to their communities, from health and well-being to economic resilience. We at IIX empower women every day through investing our energy in SMEs that are owned by women and specifically target SDG 5, gender equality. Now, with that brief introduction, let me pass the conversation over to my colleague, Jennifer Chien, Director of Research and Advisory, to share IIX's latest work in Latin America and the Caribbean, and Maria Gonzalez, our colleague based in Mexico, to talk about our plans to bring the Women's Livelihood Bond to the region. Following this, we will hear from my dear friend, Riyal Chaudhry, about Market Access's work in Latin America and the Caribbean and what they're doing next. We're incredibly excited to partner with Market Access on 3 webinars that are really shining a spotlight on how capital markets can be used to drive gender equality for women the world over. Jennifer, on to you.
Great, thank you, Professor Shahnaz. And I'm very pleased to be here today because I myself, as an Asian American, spent a good 10 years of my own life working very closely with Latino migrants in the US who are coming from Chiapas and Veracruz to Quito and San Salvador to create livelihoods for people of color in North Carolina. So this topic today is very near and dear to my own heart. And later, I'll be pleased to welcome my colleague Maria Gonzalez to speak as well. So just a brief word in Spanish, because I don't get to use it often here in Asia. En nuestra empresa, cuando decimos Defiant Optimism, es en parte una referencia al espíritu detrás de nuestro trabajo para transformar el sistema financiero. Y transformar el sistema financiero significa que tenemos la tarea de cambiar la forma en que las personas invierten, toman decisiones comerciales y determinan qué es de valor financiero. Una parte clave del cambio es unir las brechas de conocimiento sobre el desarrollo sostenible para gobiernos, empresas, inversores y comunidades, de modo que puedan desempeñar un papel más catalizador. Así pues, como parte de la discusión de hoy, vamos a dedicar unos minutos a hablar sobre cuáles son esas brechas de conocimiento en el sur global y América Latina. And now I switch back to English. Next slide. So just a few words on our global context first, before we dive into Latin America. Looking at where we are today, despite promising developments, we know that we are very much far from reaching our goals on the sustainable development. Progress has slowed in some areas such as food security and food and poverty reduction. And with COVID, we know all of this has worsened for some of the world's poorest countries. So the promise of sustainable investing is that the private sector has the potential to finance this gap in order to meet the SDGs by 2030. Next slide. The pandemic has also shown us the power of innovative finance. So we see that the capacity for innovative finance across the global south is uneven, particularly in Latin America and Africa. We've seen that Asia has far surpassed the other regions by volume of social bond issuances, which has helped countries finance social and health responses in the wake of the pandemic. So the potential is absolutely there. We just need more inclusive financing that is really working for the 99%. Next slide. Now diving into Latin America, we see great potential for sustainable investing. So looking at both sides of the supply and demand of capital, we see that sustainable investing has declined over the past few years. On the supply side, impact capital has decelerated, with the continent having lower volume of total impact investments in 2019 than South Africa alone. On the demand side, we see that impact capital is also uneven, and it's concentrated in specific sectors and countries that's really leading to an unbalanced market. So we know that Mexico, Brazil, and Ecuador account for 54% of total impact investments in the region, and agriculture and microfinance account for 65% of the total deals in 1 year. And solutions to bridge those gaps in supply and demand is few and far between. So there can be much more support from governments and multilateral organizations. So this really does show us that there's a colossal room for growth in sustainable investing. Next. So at IX, the question really for us is, how do we move forward with this potential? And we really believe the public, private, and civil society all have a role to play. Growing the ecosystem means supporting the different sectors and understanding the right solutions, designing them and piloting them. And this is exactly what we did with partners like the Rockefeller Foundation or USAID with our Women's Livelihood Bond series, which is now part of the G7 2X challenge. Next slide. So with this in mind, advancing sustainability for us at IX really requires a reckoning of economic recovery and poverty reduction and persisting racial and gender inequality. So we take a three-pronged approach to building the markets and unlocking capital, which you see here on this slide, but I won't go into. I'll actually hand it over to my colleague Maria, who's Associate Vice President of Impact Partners, to really show you how we applied these three prongs here in Asia. Next slide.
Thank you, Jennifer. So it's a pleasure, first of all, to be here. I'll switch briefly to Spanish. So, como una mexicana, como una latinoamericana, para mí es increíblemente emocionante estar aquí hoy platicando del trabajo de IIX y específicamente del trabajo que IIX planea hacer en Latinoamérica. Entonces, espero que podamos explicar nuestros planes de entrar a Latinoamérica y crear partnerships para poder hacer mucho impacto en Latinoamérica. And I'll switch back to English. So first of all, I'll just, as Jennifer was saying, I'll illustrate a little bit of our work and how we approach a new market. And to do that, I will use our work in the Philippines as a case study. So in the Philippines over the past 10 years, a key part of our work has been to support stakeholders such as the Philippine government, the Asian Development Bank, and UN SDGs, as well as NGOs like Oxfam and private sector firms like Bank of America, with bridging the knowledge gap through doing research and insights and supporting them on that front. And then through that work, we've also built a foundation for innovative financial solutions. So first of all, we support SMEs become investment ready through impact partners by enabling them to cater to investors and raise funds to continue impacting lives. And we've supported them in impacting over 25 million lives. And secondly, we've also created innovative financial instruments like the Women's Livelihood Bond, which I'll speak about in a little bit more detail in a minute. And then the third pillar of our work has been to unlock more capital by providing investors with the information they need to make capital allocation decisions. And we do this through IX Values, which is our technology-driven impact measurement tool. So altogether, throughout all this work, we've directly facilitated close to $20 million in capital into the country, which actually represents around 30% of all impact investing deals that have happened in the Philippines. Next slide, please. So going a little bit deeper into the Women's Livelihood Fund itself, it is a $150 million series of innovative debt securities that aims to empower 3 million women with sustainable livelihoods around the world. So far, we have issued 3 bonds focused in Asia, but this is about to change. So the bond series successfully brings together a vast array of private and public sector partners, including the United States International Development Finance Corporation, who provided us with a $100 million partial credit guarantee as part of their WGDP 2X Asia initiative. And through the bond series, we've supported financial inclusion, we've driven climate action and targeted community resilience against COVID-19, which has been crucial in the past year. And for this work, we've received numerous awards, including the 2019 UN Global Climate Action Award, and you can see some of the other ones listed in the slide. Linking this back to the Philippines, we have unlocked over $6 million in private capital to support underserved women and women entrepreneurs in the Philippines throughout the pandemic. Next slide, please. So as I briefly mentioned, we've now issued 3 bonds, the first having been issued in 2017, and each of these bonds have grown in scale and size. So to date, we've mobilized $48 million in capital to empower 500,000 women and girls advancing COVID relief, recovery, and resilience in Asia. And we have big plans to scale this even further. A word on the Women's Catalyst Fund, which is our next generation gender lens vehicle providing first loss capital to gender lens innovative financial instruments like the Women's Livelihood Fund. So looking forward, our plans are to scale the Women's Catalyst Fund to issue a $50 million WLB4, which will cover both Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. And then going even beyond that, we're planning to expand the WLB5 to Latin America in 2022. Next slide, please. So to achieve this, we're looking for partners like the Inter-American Development Bank and others to help prepare and sow the seed for WLB5. With that, we invite you to get started with us today. Embrace innovation and drive social and financial returns in this new era. I'll now be handing over to our guest speaker on market access, Riyad Chaudhry, who will be introduced by Sarah Tam. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thanks so much, Jennifer and Maria. That was fantastic. So we are delighted to be collaborating with our partners at Market Access to bring you today's episode. We do have Mr. Riyad Chaudhry, who is the head of Asia Pacific at Market Access, as well as the CEO of Market Access here in Singapore, to share a few words. Unfortunately, he couldn't be with us today, but he did pre-record a message, and we'll play that for you right now.
Thank you, Durreen, and your team at IIX for giving me and Market Access this opportunity. I'm honored to be a part of this event, to be able to contribute to such an important discussion on global sustainability. What happened over the last year has undoubtedly brought people and institutions together. It also shifted the focus more than ever on sustainability and community goals. Equality, inclusion, and environmental challenges have been brought into the spotlight all the more so. The same can be done in our own capital markets. We can bring greater collective force to bear on these challenges, and Market Access will play a role in that effort. Some of you might not be familiar with Market Access or the role we play into this. Echoing what Christoph, our CEO for EMEA and APAC, said in his speech for this same webinar series last month, there are two elements to answering these questions. Firstly, Market Access is a global electronic bond trading platform and provider of market data and post-trade services for firms trading fixed income. We sit at the heart of the capital markets, whose partnerships are helping to make IIX a globally successful and impactful organization. In practical terms, we're one of the main platforms where green bonds, sustainable bonds, climate-linked bonds, and bonds like the Women's Livelihood Bond Series can be traded. In other words, where they can become more liquid, more visible, more attractive to international investors. As a result of this, we have a critically important role to play promoting not only the bonds, but also the stories, the people, and the communities that sit behind them. In a world that fixates so clearly on alpha and on value realized, we continue to learn that we have a role to play in defining what value really means. Secondly, as a firm, we are on our own journey to being more equitable, more sustainable, and more climate aware. We want to be just as much a market leader in driving change as we are in fixed income trading. However, we know that to do so, we need to learn as much as possible about the challenges that surround these issues and to align with the people who are leading the charge to tackle them. Our own steps so far have been small, but meaningful. Just on time for this webinar, our ESG report has been published last week. The report is a clear statement of what we have achieved, what we have learned to date, and where we are headed in the next 3 to 5 years. In addition to this wonderful partnership with IIX, the pioneer in impact investing and the global leader in sustainability, the ESG report covers other initiatives we embarked on in 2020. For example, we signed up to the 7 UN Women's Empowerment Principles, and by doing so, we made a commitment to advancing gender equality in our own workplace and in the markets and communities we serve. Within the same year, we launched a climate change-oriented program, Trading for Trees. The program is simple: planting 5 trees for every $1 million in green traded volume on the platform. In just over a year, we've planted nearly 134,000 trees, and the number continues to grow every day, literally. Even looking at Latin America specifically, which is the region today's webinar focuses on, we are proud of our philanthropic partnership with Empower and our educational partnership with EMTA, the Trade Association for the Emerging Markets. Empower has gender and inclusion at its heart, and it works with local organizations in emerging markets countries to both support and empower vulnerable young people between the age of 10 and 24. We support them on a series of fundraising initiatives, with the last one being the EN Gives Challenge last year. We were able to raise over $100,000 and help over 1,000 young people. Although it's just a start, with 8 projects supporting many of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals established by the UN, we want to make an impact and contribute to a more equitable world. For market access, this is a continuous learning experience and one we're very grateful for. In the Defiant Optimist episode last month, we learned that there are a number of social protection schemes across various countries in support of gender equality. Nevertheless, what is perhaps missing is the design of innovative, gender-focused financial instruments. From the Assistant Secretary General and UN Women's Deputy Executive Director, Anita Bhatia, we learned that gender bonds and other similar efforts should be driven by local governments and supported by the various private sector to truly have an impact. So I'm very excited to hear today's perspective, focusing on the private sector and how its capital and future generation of leaders can contribute and make an impact, starting from regions like Latin America and the Caribbean. I look forward to this next discussion with Durreen and President Mauricio Claver-Carone of the Inter-American Development Bank, and thanks IIX again for your partnership. Over to you, Durreen and Mauricio. Thank you.
Thank you, Riyadh, and a very warm welcome to you, Mauricio. Let me first do a little bit of introduction. It's great to see you. We can see you very clearly. I have the great honor and pleasure to introduce our special guest for this session, Mauricio Claver-Carone, President of the Inter-American Development Bank. Mauricio has led a prolific career in international development, a lawyer by training. He has served as Deputy Assistant to the President of the United States and Senior Director for Western Hemisphere Affairs at the National Security Council. He also previously served as the U.S. Executive Director at the International Monetary Fund, and finally as Senior Advisor for International Affairs at the U.S. Department of Treasury, where he helped develop legislation to create the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, actually a key partner of IIX, whom we actually create the Women's Livelihood Bond. So Mauricio, welcome to the show. It's an incredibly impressive resume, and we're thrilled to have you here. But let's start with some of the more fun questions. So starting off with, what has been a defining moment in your career where you have led with defiant optimism?
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. And I was looking at the presentation of Latin America on IIX, and I didn't see the IDB there as a partner, so let's make sure to change that. I need to see the IDB there as a partner, so let's talk, because we would love to partner up, and I think we have great opportunities. I was very impressed by the presentation, so I'd love to do that. And by the way, thank you. I love the name of the series, Defiant Optimist, and if therefore de facto by my being here makes me a Defiant Optimist, is the nicest compliment I've ever had, because that's exactly how I perceive myself, and obviously what we're trying to do here and the challenges that we face. And on those challenges, I mean, look, it's a wonderful segue into what the region is literally facing. Needless to say, the pandemic has devastated Latin America and the Caribbean. We're seeing that you have about 8% of the world's population, yet 30% of all COVID-19 deaths there. So it's a huge challenge. And despite, the efforts that we've taken to stop the virus, the region just reported its deadliest week since the pandemic began. So, I mean, what we're seeing here is without precedent. We've just seen about a fatality rate about 3.5 times the global average, 875,000 deaths in Latin America. And economically, we're seeing that we're talking about the worst economic contraction in 2020 in 200 years, since 1821. So this is a real challenging time. So obviously, we've had to move fast, and we have to be optimistic and develop tools to help the region in that regards. And that's precisely what we're focused on. And I don't know if you want to go through that.
Yeah, so I think let me just sort of jump in there. You're absolutely, I mean, that was where I was going to lead to. So just for our audience, I mean, just elaborating on some of the statistics that you have shared. Basically in Latin America and the Caribbean, I mean, sadly, they have really suffered acutely and much more than the rest of the world. with Brazil and Mexico having some of the highest death rates. And I guess the numbers that you just alluded to in terms of the economic contraction, I mean, it was about 7%, in some countries contracted even more than 15%. Now, of course, the natural segue is how did IDB react to this crisis, and what are the new priorities and directions needed to roll out the vaccine and get the economies growing again?
Yeah, so we pursued a whole of institution effort. And one of my priorities in Iran, I was really breaking the silos here at the IDB. And I'm really proud of the fact that I think we've done so, obviously having to do so to meet this huge challenge. So we've figured out how to have a whole institution strategy to really address the health and economic needs, and obviously then focus on turning the page in the long-term recovery. So we've approved nearly 40 projects for $7 billion on the health side on 4 priority areas. So we had first, immediate response, obviously, to the public health emergency, also the safety nets for the vulnerable populations, economic productivity and employment, and finally, obviously, which we're all now going to deal with, and we're going to deal with for a while, the fiscal policies to cushion those economic blows. Last year, our totals just of sovereign guarantees set a record of the bank of over $12.5 billion, and overall, our aggregate disbursements rose by 40% to almost $15 billion. Add to that IDB Invest, our private sector arm, that was another $9 billion in approvals and mobilization. And so we had a record year in that regards in responding to this crisis. So needless to say, we're putting our money where our mouth is in that regards. When the focus shifted to vaccines, within my first 100 days, we created a $1 billion initiative to help countries buy and distribute the vaccines. And we're doing so already with 10 countries, especially the smaller ones that need the funding, like the Bahamas, Dominican Republic, Belize, Ecuador, Honduras, Salvador, Panama, Trinidad. We're helping everything we can. And we also are the first international financial institution to have launched a first-of-its-kind instrument to help governments negotiate with vaccine makers and mitigate risk for indemnity clauses, which is critical to democratizing access to vaccines, which is one of the big problems.
So is that working, Mauricio? How is that working in terms of as an instrument?
That instrument, so we launched it about 4 weeks ago. We put the pieces together, and we talked with the pharmaceutical companies about it. They were very interested. What we've done now is we're with 2 countries. We're finalizing that deals with 2 countries in particular in their bilateral negotiations with pharmaceuticals. I'm hopeful. I think that what we saw early on was essentially the pharmaceutical companies were there was not a set standard in regards to what they were looking for in their contracts, et cetera. And as demand increased and the conditions became more and more onerous. So what we sought to do, and then of course, if you're a pharmaceutical company, they were looking to sell to the easiest buyer, right? The one that posed less risk. So we've tried to bridge that gap. I think I'm optimistic about it, and I think with actually 3 countries, we're about to finish some deals there, and hopefully we've been able to appropriately mitigate some risk for them there.
Right. Now it's interesting, in the mid-90s, of course, I'm going to completely age myself, but that's fine. I actually was trading Brady bonds for Latin America. So it's very, very interesting to see how economic recovery has always been approached in Latin America from very top down. So I think what I would like to do is now let's shift gear and think about maybe bottom up and really focus on the SMEs. Now at IAX, we really focus on women-owned SMEs, or SMEs which are influencing women as the primary avenue, frankly, for financial inclusion, climate action, and community resilience. Now in Latin America and the Caribbean alone, SMEs are 99.9% of the firms, and there's a funding gap of 1.2 trillion. So what are we doing about it in terms of, in Latin America, we have 2.7 million SMEs who are expected to close due to the impacts of COVID. And you have actually approved $21 million financing. But what are the initiatives that this financing is going towards? And how are you ensuring that women are at the center of the proposed recovery? Yeah.
Hey, look, and part of our Vision 2025, which is the pathway towards a recovery, small, medium-sized enterprises are a key factor, but also gender empowerment is also a key factor. So 2 out of the 5 areas of business lines that we're creating on Vision 2025 is based on those. And in regards to small businesses, we're focusing really on 3 key areas there: expanding access to financing, as you mentioned, developing talent, obviously, and improving the business climate, because we can't forget that. So as you mentioned,
but is that linked to the COVID situation right now?
100%, because they were the ones that were the most impacted, you know, and we already started at disadvantage, right? Because despite the fact that even before, SMEs represented about 99% or so of business in the region, they only accounted for about 25% of GDP. And one of the big problems there is, as you alluded to, the cause for that low growth has been the limited access to credit. So, you know, that $1 trillion facing gap, and by the way, 70% of female-led small, medium-sized enterprises in the region that apply for credit don't get it. But yet, data shows that women-led SMEs in the region are 10% more successful than those in regards to income than those led by men. So that gap is what we need to close. So obviously we're focusing on how we can work within policies, regulatory frameworks, but also improve the intermediation and financial inclusion. We're doing that. We're doing it also with the private sector. As you know, for every dollar of public financing leverage through the IDB, we're mobilizing over almost $1.50 in that regards, and that's helpful. But we're also working with the fintech sectors. I think there's an opportunity there. Fintech business devote about 60% of their capacity to financing small, medium enterprises, and I think that could be key there. So that financing second-tier banking programs and guarantee funds that can mobilize private financing. So we're doing all of that, but also kind of along what we're discussing here, we're also promoting solutions in the capital markets, thematic bonds, which you've been talking about, digital payments, fintech. In Mexico, which I just saw part of your presentation, we just developed the first ever gender bond to help finance women entrepreneurs. And obviously, to help keep the small, medium enterprises during the pandemic, we deployed about $3 billion or so in loans for public financial intermediaries to help improve access for financing for businesses. We did that Argentina, Barbados, Brazil, Mexico, Panama, Uruguay, and others. I'll give you an example in the Caribbean. In Barbados, we strengthened the local financial institutions there through a partial guarantee fund and digitalizing the credit processing, and that helped boost credit opportunities for SMEs.
Yeah, I'm sure. So Mauricio, now these are all fantastic initiatives. I mean, it's you must be so proud. But how come they're not showing in the numbers? They're not showing in the economic recovery numbers. We just talked about all the contractions.
Because you got to put it on steroids. I mean, look, at the end of the day, the contraction hit that sector in particular. And what our challenge here, and my challenge here, and why we're in the Defiant Optimist series, is that despite the worst contraction in 200 years, we're putting our foot on the accelerator. We're being more innovative. We're taking more risk. You know, sometimes I think, look,
so
development banks.
So what do we need to tweak? What do we need to tweak with what you're doing right now to really get to the new normal?
Take more risk. We need to take more risk. We need to be more innovative. We need to take more risk. And literally, we need to essentially I agree with you 100%. And in my 7 months here, I already told our teams, hey, look, what we've been doing clearly has not been working. So we need to turn the page here. COVID worsened the problem. It unveiled a lot of the systemic problems throughout, the infrastructure and the health systems and the financing systems, et cetera, throughout the region. Now, I do believe, and that's why I'm here as part of the Defiant Optimist series, that COVID also has unveiling those opportunities, has showed where we can fix this and where the opportunities lie. And that's what we've focused on. And that's part of what our Vision 2025 is. So what we're doing already is we're literally not only helping stem the downside, but we're looking to opportunities to create the upside, and that's precisely what we're doing, and SMEs plays a big role. And by the way, we're also bringing private sector innovation to the bank. We're doing our own digital transformation. We just launched last month our own digital transformation of the bank so that we can lead and we can help countries mirror that as well so they can be more efficient and effective. And by the way, for the first time in history of this bank, and I'm very proud of this, is we're bringing private sector thinking as well to the bank. Our executive vice president, we've named the highest ranking Latin American woman in the history of this bank, Irene Mejia, who was the CEO of Citibank in Central America, who was a leader in regards to financing for women-led businesses. And we're bringing that knowledge here so that we can be more effective in doing so that we can have also more in-tune knowledge of what those bottlenecks have been so that we can apply it at the development bank level here in Washington, D.C. So look, we're not resting. We are going to change things so that we can be more impactful.
That is fabulous. And I think also the reality is Latin America, which, going back to when I kind of covered the region 25 years ago, it seems like some of the issues still remain the same. And one of them is this incredible wealth gap in the region. And I think some of the initiatives you're talking about, hopefully, they will address that. Now, how is IDB prioritizing the COVID-19 support for Latin America and the Caribbean countries, which are the poorest? Because again, it seems like there's always a bit of a gap in terms of the things that are happening, and especially what are the plans to ramp up projects in countries like Venezuela and Belize and Guatemala, who are really severely suffering from the crisis. And of course, on top of that, there's now a whole refugee and migration issue as well that's impacting the other countries. So just curious to hear about that. How are we dealing with the inequality in the region?
Yeah, let me take a quick step back though. Look, COVID has brought a once in a generation opportunity, actually once in 2 or 3 generation opportunities, at least in the history of this bank, in the 60 years of this bank, to really take advantage of those 5 areas that we've identified in that Vision 2025. Because as you just said, it's the same issues you've been dealing with for 30 years. But some things have changed, whether it's on integration and nearshoring. Finally, the corporate will is looking a little bit less at Asia and looking more at Latin America and the Caribbean, particularly because of the supply chain security. And that's something that I live very, very much firsthand, and I hear from companies every single day. We're also, in regards to small, medium-sized enterprises as well, we're seeing those financing gaps. But then digitalization presents an opportunity to break through all of that. Telework, telemedicine, teleeducation, huge unique opportunities there. Gender, look, we've identified the women were the most impacted by COVID-19, but yet they are the key to economic growth. Just OECD parity levels for inclusion of women in the workforce, that's $1 trillion opportunity for Latin America and the Caribbean. That's a 20% increase in GDP for the region. It's not brain science here, right? It's literally taking the common sense and bringing practical solutions and not doing the same thing we've been doing, because it clearly hasn't been working, and being more innovative. Now, poor countries, look.
Right. No, that's fantastic, Mauricio. And I'm just curious. I'm going to put you on spot. But how many women have you brought into IDB since you joined? How's the ratio looking?
Let me tell you. let me tell you this. Oh, look.
I'm curious.
We're leading by example. I'm extraordinarily proud of this. We're leading by example. I am the highest ranking Latin American woman in the 61-year history of this bank is Reina Irene Mejia, our executive vice president, who, as I mentioned, was the CEO of Citibank in Central America. We have the first woman chief of staff in the history of this bank, in Jessica Bedoya, who also joined me who was at the DFC before and had previously had a 15-year career in the U.S. government and is outstanding. Our ratios are increasing dramatically. And by the way, I'm already changing the culture of the bank. You know what we did? If you went to our boardroom here, you would love this, and I hope you come with a camera and shoot this. If you come to our boardroom here, there's these beautiful paintings of all the liberation leaders of Latin America and the Caribbean. Guess what? They were all men. You know what we did? We now there's a painter who's done these beautiful portraits of the women independence leaders from the region, and now it's man, woman, man, woman, man, woman.
Brilliant.
We're challenging that culture. We're changing this. This is a new IDB with new leadership and therefore new efforts. And by the way, if women are the main drivers of economic growth in the region, they're going to be the main drivers of policies here at the IDB. You have no doubt about that.
I love that. And I love that they're now in your boardroom as well. Now, moving on to impact investing. Now, impact investing has taken the world by storm, as we know, representing close to $800 billion in the market. And IDB has a track record for working with impact investors, but only 2% of the total impact investment is focused on Latin America. And there is yet to be concrete national strategies from many of the governments to grow the market. And in fact, investments in Latin America have actually fallen since 2017. So what is IDB's plan to stimulate impact investing in the region? And I'm assuming it's linked to your 5 pillars.
Yeah. But I think it also has to do with good metrics. And I think bringing in that private sector practicality is also bringing good metrics. But look, one way to boost that investing is really adopting more shared impact measurement, management approaches to integrate impact financial returns. And that's going to bring clarity, credibility, comparability, which, as you know, is key to impact investing. Here at IDB Invest, our private sector arm, we had our end-to-end impact management framework that does that already. And really what we seek to do is support the entire investment life cycle from deal origination to final evaluation. That's obviously going to be key there. So we're also using our know-how to help investors choose and to structure deals in that regards. And I think that that's going to be really important. So projects with the greatest impact potential are going to be put towards the front line and help them track and evaluate the impact achieved, manage ESG risk, and that's going to help drive that much needed capital there. However, there are barriers, and let me just, because I know we move fast here, but there are barriers for impact investors here, and I think that's something that we need to address too. That the perception of a lack of deal flow, the limited access to enterprise financing and domestic capital for those, the perceived scale limitations or regulatory barriers, and we can play a key role in helping governments strengthen that environment for impact investment across all of these areas. So that's key for us. And key for us is strengthening the financial sector to help expand that innovation, tech adoption, and integration value chains. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm going to ramble as much as you let me go. I'm going to keep going.
We're so excited to have you. We have many questions. So this is absolutely brilliant. So just going a little deeper on impact investing. Now, it's interesting, the impact investing movement, it was born out of the ashes of two failures, right? The failure of the financial system after the aftermath of 2008 global crisis, and actually failure of economic development in the globalization era. So with IIX, our work has very much been a part of this movement to change this long-standing behaviors among global bankers, whether in Wall Street or IMF, and to be really bottom-up, right? So responsive to local needs, and give value to the people and the planet, and of course the profit that goes with it. Now, Latin America was at the heart of the global debate that criticized the top-down, one-size-fit-all approaches to development, as I kind of touched on that a little bit. Even associating with IMF and with the Washington Consensus, IDB was formed with a nod with a more nuanced and localized approach. How successful has this been, and how different is it from US's approach to the region, and can, again, impact investing play a role in a more localized level?
Yeah, 100%. And look, we have a key footprint in the region, so we know and understand it. And again, I mean, I've been here 7 months, and in that regards, we've developed a strategy. In that regards, I've noticed and I've seen, and with this new team, this fresh eyes and this women leadership that has come in here, we're looking with fresh eyes at what has worked and what hasn't worked and what we can do better. I'm really proud of what we're doing, particularly in the transparency side. If we're going to attract those investors, and I think we have been leader in the social bonds throughout. I think we've done about 16 of those in about 7 currencies throughout the region. I just mentioned the latest in Mexico there on the gender bonds that we issued. But I think across the board, also tools to help increase transparency is going to be key, which is why yesterday, coincidentally, we're really proud of having launched a new transparency mechanism for the green bonds there. Therefore, to help particularly Latin America and the Caribbean, well, not particularly, but it should be everywhere, but in Latin America and the Caribbean as leaders in this region, to help bring more confidence to those investors in regards to not only what they're investing in and the projects they're investing in, but also to have updates in regards to metrics, in regards to performance, et cetera. So that Green Bond Transparency Initiative is one example of what we're doing in that regards, but we're also doing it, by the way, on the infrastructure space as well. We're doing creating new. One of the things that I want to leave here, and why we talked about, the digital transformation of the bank in itself is one of the legacies that I want to leave here in my 5 years, is also the modernization, the 21st century bank with innovative tools, innovative mechanisms that particularly serve Latin America and the Caribbean. One of the biggest issues there that we've seen as well from a transparency perspective is the middlemen, right? There's middlemen. If you've been following it, there's always middlemen everywhere from an infrastructure side. So we also created Built Americas, which is an app to help create for all of the projects we do in infrastructure throughout the region, digital and otherwise, to help the originators and the companies that are servicing to help have direct access to suppliers and producers in the countries themselves. So we're bridging all of those gaps as well. We're doing so creatively. I think that in itself is going to stimulate a lot more confidence in investors, which, look, as you know, because you've been doing this for not aging you, but you yourself admit it. So you were trading Brady bonds. So you've been doing this for a while. And therefore, in that regards, those are some of the key issues that investors tell me every day. When I try to get them to invest in Latin America and the Caribbean, they always tell me, oh, we had a problem 10 years ago and it had to do with this. So we're bridging all of those gaps. I think we can uniquely do so to help bring more confidence and partner up with all these institutional investors that are looking for those opportunities. And Latin America stands to gain from it, like I said, in a generational perspective.
Right. Now that makes sense, Mauricio. And I think it's also interesting, kind of going hand in hand, and you brought up in infrastructure. So, it begs me to kind of go to the issue of infrastructure, which is very, very much on the public policy side. You are spearheading the American CRESE program, which means to catalyze private sector investment in Latin America and the Caribbean. Okay, you were.
I was in my old job. Oh yeah, were. Okay.
There'll be heavy focus. Which had a heavy focus on infrastructure. So while there's no new budget allocated from USAID, DFC to play a critical role through this, but IX's work with donors and multilaterals has increasingly had to address the issue of greenwashing. So we do see that there's a lot of greenwashing and impact washing through these infrastructure projects, which get exacerbated when development dollars are only really focused on infrastructure, right? And that has been sort of the whole development push for many years, which frankly, has not really worked very effectively. So sort of addressing the elephant in the room, so American CRESE has been described as America's response to China's Belt and Road Initiative. But with both the American CRESE and the BRI investment heavily focused on fossil fuel infrastructure, how much of an alternative development pathway is it? And is there room for impact investing to take off in this environment?
Yeah. So I am no longer a U.S. policymaker, so I will not speak on behalf of the U.S. in regards
That's
to.
Okay, but the process has started.
I got it. Let me give me a chance. So I'm not gonna. So in regards, I'm gonna tell you what we're doing here from the IDB, and in the IDB within our Vision 2025, we see those 5 key opportunities. We talked about a couple of them, but also look, integration, supply chain, nearshoring is a huge opportunity in that regards, and I think that that's something that we can help finance that creates employment opportunities, that creates opportunities in the region, and we're going to follow. But look, on climate, here's the reality. Climate is a huge opportunity for the region. It's an enormous opportunity for the region. And one of the other things that we're really proud of is we just launched at our annual meeting in Barranquilla our first climate fund, which we call the Amazon Bioeconomy Fund. And there what we're looking for is it has buy-in from all 7 countries of the Amazon. It's the only initiative, and I think one of the most important climate initiatives in the world, buy-in from all 7 countries. And we're looking for those development projects that can help that region and that can help those countries per se. But here's the huge opportunity there, right? If we're going to move towards a green economy, renewables, et cetera, that in itself also requires minerals and things to produce those lithium batteries and things of the sort. Now, in so doing, this region has a huge advantage in regards to the resources, but not the processing. I'll give you an example. 2/3 of the world's lithium is found right here in Latin America and the Caribbean. 2/3, Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, some Peru, some Colombia. Yet all that lithium goes to China for processing and then ends up coming back for the batteries to Tesla and everyone else. We need to, one of our priorities is how do you streamline that? Rare earth minerals that we also need for renewables. The second largest producer of rare earth minerals in the world after China is Brazil. But guess what? Where are those rare earth minerals? They're also in that Amazon area, right? So we need to then work on, which is also why we're working here on a new mining framework. Because here's the thing, you can't have and there is something that concerns me in the region. There are countries that, like Guyana, Suriname, for example, whose entire development is going to be based on those newfound energy resources, natural gas, oil, offshore there. And there's a huge opportunity there. So we have to work with those countries to help them from the infrastructure side in order to develop those industries, because these are a unique opportunity for those countries. But on the flip side, we also have to work on the mining side. How do you have responsible mining? How do we create a framework to work with those countries as there is a move to renewable? What doesn't make sense, and this is something I've talked a lot about, and I've talked about it internally, and I talk a lot to our shareholders, you can't be both against traditional energy and against mining. Because if you're going to go one direction to the other, so what's incumbent upon us is to find frameworks for responsible mining practices. I think that a lot of companies are looking at it in that regards, because that's a huge opportunity for the region as we see this greater move towards green energy, renewables, et cetera. And so I think that we need to adapt, and that will work.
Right. No, I think you're absolutely right. But I think, again, mining is something that obviously, incredibly hurts the environment. And, we have to, as we are seeing, we have to kind of find ways to work around, renewables and all the different ways.
That's why it's incumbent upon us to have a responsible framework and working with both companies and countries so that we can help them get the buy-in from the communities, that we can help them do so in an environmentally safe way. But we're going to have to do so. If we're going to move towards renewables, those renewables don't function off of, pure oxygen. They also require minerals, and they require lithium, and they require rare earth in order to function. So that's just the reality we have to face.
Yeah, but not all renewables, because we do work on this sector very, very, very deeply. So I think that moves on to actually what IX wants to do, because we want to come in. We want to come into Latin America. We already have a $100 million series, which we are going in with in Africa, and we have empowered close to 1 million women with these bonds. And interestingly, our women's livelihood bond is actually the only social bond that chiefly centers on women. Okay, and it was the first publicly listed globally in the history of capital markets, an instrument that focuses on women. And without being a sovereign bond, right? So we brought in countries into the market who never even came in. So how can we replicate that in Latin America and Caribbeans, and how can IDB help us do this so that we can actually have growth from ground up?
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad that you mentioned the Women's Livelihood Fund, and because ultimately the IDB not only has been a leader, I think we've been a pioneer in development of gender bonds in the region. Like, I'm not going to go into, obviously gender bonds better than most. We share your knowledge that it going to help improve access to financing, leadership positions. It's going to increase equality in labor markets. So for all the same reasons that you're supportive, we get it. We're particularly interested, though, in the huge potential of gender bonds to increase financing for SMEs, which kind of segues into what we were talking about before. And I think we're already seeing positive results in that regards. We've seen 6 gender bonds have been issued in Latin America for about nearly $500 million, and we've backed 5 of those 6 bonds. So we're working very intensely in this sphere. IDB Invest, our private sector arm, supported 4 bonds with commercial markets. We did the first one with Banco Bandismo in Panama, 2 in Colombia, 1 in Peru, I believe. And we've also supported, as I just said again before, the gender bond in Mexico, which was issued by the National Development Bank by FIDA there. So I think that, and by the way, that one, the Mexico one, was the first one to be issued in a local market, institutional market in Mexico. I think that was also successful. So, and by the way, it was oversubscribed 4 times by investors, and it obtained pre-pandemic spreads. So there's a desire out there, right? I think there's a market out there, there's a desire out there, and we need to take advantage of there. So we're going to focus on that, and we're going to continue, and we're going to continue. How can we help? Look, we're going to continue to provide technical access to technical assistance to do so. We're going to, help continue increasing that confidence and the public-private merging there in order to continue bringing that in that regards. And finally, look, we need to develop, and I think here we can work together as well. We need to continue to develop frameworks that are consistent with the principles and those set by the International Capital Market Association and others in regards to gender bonds. And we can also provide, and the other thing I'm going to do, and I commit to, and I think we can do together, is to help provide guarantees to help reduce perceived risks and to try to get more investors involved. So we can do a whole bunch, and
that's a great start. That's a great start. So Mauricio, thank you so much. So now we're going to move on to the more lighthearted portion of the session, so that we can actually ease into the Q&A.
Wait, this wasn't lighthearted? I couldn't tell.
No, it was all, it was all learning. So
we're
going to do this very fast, okay? So you cannot think. You just have to kind of do it, okay? So the one word that defines you.
Perseverant.
All right, good. What book are you reading right now?
The 2020 IDB Macroeconomic Report.
No, you're not reading that. That's not.
No, I am. I really am. I honestly have no time to read anything but our reports. I really am reading the entire report, including the annexes.
That's dedication. That's dedication. What's your hidden talent, other than being able to read at night?
Dancing. I'm a dancer.
Oh my God, I love dancing. Okay, so next time we meet, we will dance. What's the best advice you've ever received?
What's the what?
Best advice you've ever received?
Be myself.
Okay, good. When you're not working, how do you like to spend your time?
My 2 kids. My two kids. I love them. They're the best. Time of my life.
Brilliant. What's the reason to be optimistic in 2021?
That it can't get worse than 2020.
Okay, well, glass is half empty but half full at the same time. Great.
Always.
Well, Mauricio, thank you so much. And we're going to move on to the Q&A, so I have to hand it over to Sarah. This was fun. Did you have fun?
I loved it. Let's do it again tomorrow.
Good. Oh, good. All right, Sarah, on to you.
Great, thanks so much. That was both interesting and very lighthearted, so thank you both for that really great discussion there. So we do have quite a number of questions in the lineup. I know we're almost at time, but let's try to get to at least 2 of these questions based on the number of likes. First question here by Dr. Jillian Marcel. What specifically will the IDB do to correct the systemic bias towards the large economies in Latin America and Caribbean with the effect of doing less in the Caribbean? The IDB Invest and the IDB are often at odds with each other. Mr. Claver-Carone, that's over to you.
Yeah, not anymore. Like, one of the things that we've done here is break the silos, and I'm very proud of that, and we've done a great deal of that in the last 7 months. So we're functioning as a group, both public side, our IDB Invest side, and IDB Lab, which is our innovation hub. And in regards to what's it's funny, like a systemic bias towards big countries. Look, I've been leading by example. This is the first time in the history of the bank that all of our vice presidents come from small countries. You know, our vice president of countries is Richard Martinez, who was the finance minister of Ecuador. Our vice president for sectors was Benigno Lopez, who was the finance minister in Paraguay. I talked about Reina, our executive vice president, the number 2 here, who comes from Honduras. So we're leading by example already. And yes, let me tell you, there have been some tension there, because, you know, there is a perception that I've been focusing a lot more in regards to the small countries. But look, we are a cooperative, and what I've been telling everyone here is that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And every country in the region, the region is very heterogeneous and has different development needs throughout. And we can work with a Chile, we can work with a Mexico, and we can work with those 19 small countries that really need our help in that regards. And that's what we're doing, and we're focusing it in a way that is frankly equitable, that helps all of those countries and doesn't create any perceptions or realities in regards to systemic imbalances of helping just the big countries versus the small countries, which I agree with the question, had been the perception and to a degree a little bit of the reality of the bank for a long time in its 60-year history. But that's changing. We're going to help all countries. You know, this is about how we can grow to help all of them, and it's not a zero-sum game, and that's what I've also been culturally trying to do here with all of our shareholders.
Great, thanks for that. I do see in a comment somebody saying, unfortunately, none of the leaders are from the Caribbean, but perhaps we can move on.
But let me. That is not true. I not only have I made a commitment in that regards, but I actually offered a few Caribbean leaders certain positions, and they have other ambitions. But that you are going to see also that the change in that in that as regards. And by the way, all of our portfolios have been increasing dramatically, including from the IDB Invest private sector side towards the Caribbean. So again, judge me. This is a 61-year institution. I've been here 7 months. Judge me by my results.
Makes sense.
Got it. Thanks for that. Second question. I know we're almost at time. We'll just get to one more. How are you measuring and monitoring the impact of the funding you are providing, and what is the time frame that you are looking at for this funding? By the timestamp, it looks like it was from earlier of the conversation. Mr. Claver-Carone, over to you.
Yeah. Well, look, we're actually creating measurement impact. Like believe it or not, one of the things that we've learned, and one of the things that I first told Reina as our EVP, and having her coming from Citi, is that we are creating the baseline so that we can measure, create metrics to measure results more effectively. Unfortunately, the bank hasn't done that well, if at all. So we're changing that altogether, and that's part of that new modern 21st century bank that we want to create here. And so it's actually a work in process, and it's one of my priorities, and one of the legacies that I want to leave here is a bank with not only better kind of institutional safeguards, but also one that measures impact, efficiencies, et cetera, so that we can do a better job in picking our projects and in focusing and in having greater development impact ultimately.
Great, thanks for that. Professor Shahnaz, anything to add before we wrap up?
Yes, I think Mauricio, it's really a fantastic way to move forward, and I think again, IX is here to help any way we can. We are one of the pioneers in measurements, as that allows us to unlock the capital, and We're the ones who created for Global Impact Investing Network. So happy to work with your colleagues. So we should definitely make this into a global effort. But thank you so much. I mean, this was
you had me at hello.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you.
100%.
With that, I think we will close up today. But thank you very much. You know, I'll go to DC and we'll have to do that dance. So
I look forward to it.
So with that, I think thanking all our guests. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Janvi, Gemma, Jennifer, and Maria from Mexico. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mauricio. Really appreciate it, and all your colleagues. And see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Great. Thanks for everyone. Thanks, Professor Shahnaz and Mr. Claver-Carone for joining us today once again and for being part of this very interesting discussion. Thanks everyone else in our audience for tuning in, and we do hope that you walk away feeling more inspired to act with defiant optimism as we see with our two leaders today. Just a quick announcement on my side. Do join us next month in May, May 27th, 9 a.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Singapore, for the next episode with Stephen Liberatore, Head of ESG and Impact, Global Fixed Income over at Naveen. This session will be on making a positive, long-lasting impact on our world through finance, and is, again, an episode that we're doing in partnership with Market Access. So feel free to tune in, and we hope to see you there. That's all from me and my team at IIX. So a big thank you once again for tuning in. Wish you all a great morning, great afternoon, and great evening, and a great rest of the day. Thank you all.